and gentlemen, the first round of the 2025 NHL Draft is now over. Even though it took years off of our lives, it is finally over. But I wanted to go through all of the picks that we saw in the first round and grade every single selection from the first overall pick all the way down to number 32. And it's going to be kind of spur of the moment, kind of more of a off-the-take type of video. So if you guys enjoy and if you guys watch till the very end, we'll be going through every single team, every single pick, so you do not want to miss any single one of them. With all the prospect analysis we have on this channel, you won't want to miss a bit of it. And of course, if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you do so, because so much more content about this NHL draft, and especially rounds 2 through 7, is going to be coming up over the next couple days that you guys won't want to miss. But let's just get straight into it with the number 1 selection first off. And for the New York Islanders, I'm going to give this pick a straight A. Matthew Schaefer was the consensus number 1. And even though for me personally, Michael Misa was my favorite prospect of this draft class, Matthew Schaefer just makes so much sense for an Islanders team that just traded Noah Dobson. They needed some pace on the defense. They needed some electricity. And Matthew Schaefer definitely brings that with the smarts, with some of the transition ability he's able to capture. That's just such a fun player, and I think will be a fan favorite for the New York Islanders especially. So a straight A in that selection. And as we go through it, just a fair warning that my average is just a straight C. It's not like a B or anything, so it's a little bit less weighted that way. So for a Islanders team to get a straight A on a first overall pick, still a very solid selection. And then we go into second overall and the San Jose Sharks, and getting Michael Misa at number 2 is an A+ pick to me. To me, the best forward and the best prospect of this draft. He, to me, is going to be a perfect second line center behind Macklin Celebrini, bringing so much pace and electricity, and especially how he's able to match up against more physical competitors, how he's able to push himself and be even better every single game. It astounds me, the talent of this guy, but also the character and how driven he is as a player. So to me, I think he's going to be so good in that San Jose system and will really be completing that forward group going forward. Plus, Igor Chernyshov and that connection with how good they were in Saginaw, not a bad duo to pair up once more. So going on to Chicago and that third overall pick, we got Anton Frindell out of Djurgården. At this selection, I'm going to give Chicago a straight B. I don't think it's the pick I would have made for them. I think Porter Martone would have made a little bit more sense for what I think they do need going forward. But of course, as we get into the later first round, they took a fair share of bigger wingers, so they were able to replace that quite well. But I think a straight B makes sense. Frindell was more in my 8 range of my rankings, but I think he fits Chicago very well. Very good at creating space, and when he does get that space, letting that shot go, which is among the best in this draft class. Just has great goal scoring instincts and knows how to use that muscle to get around physical competition. So I think he's something that, especially in Chicago's top 6, especially on the power play, is going to do some pretty big damage. Though I think he still projects more as a winger than a center long term. So something for Chicago to potentially think about. Then we go on to the Utah Mammoth, and of course, a pretty big one, having Kalen Noye going to Utah. This was kind of what I was expecting, in all honesty. I think Noye just kind of fits what Utah wants and needs more of going into the future. I don't think Noye is at least plays very big, but he is a bigger center at 6'2" and was fantastic in the QMJHL, especially in the QMJHL playoffs, leading a Moncton team in so many categories. This soft skill, especially up the Russian transition, it's among the best in this class. One of the best playmakers, one of the best visions of this draft class for sure. I have some concerns over the pace of play, and that footwork I think will need to come a little bit for him to be a top tier centerman, but I think at the very least he'll be a pretty good third line center, and I think could touch into the second C role if he really needed to. So for that, I'm going to give it a B-. Not a home run pick, but for the Utah Mammoth, I mean, I think it was probably better than if they were to go for a Roger McQueen, for example. But let's get into that 5th overall pick and the Nashville Predators, and this is really where the draft opened up completely. You had Brady Martin going to Nashville in a pretty massive surprise. It wasn't really a surprise to see Brady Martin go inside this top tier, this top 7, for example, but it was kind of a surprise to see Nashville be the team that took him, because we heard a lot about them liking Porter Martone, James Hagens, Jacob Bryant especially, I thought was actually a pretty good fit for the Preds long term. But Brady Martin is going to bring you a lot of physicality, a lot of energy as a center. I just don't quite see him being more than a third line center. A pretty decent one, but they don't quite have a ton of pure upside up the middle in Nashville. And to me, I think that might be a little bit of a problem long term. If Nashville is to make the playoffs, Brady Martin I think will be a pretty good player there, but you need top end skill to be able to make the playoffs in the first place. And I don't think Brady Martin quite has that. For the pick, I'm going to give it a straight C. I think it's pretty average, but I don't think it's the end of the world, nor do I think it's a home run pick whatsoever. Just kind of average to me. But we go into 6th overall and the Philadelphia Flyers, and at this selection, getting Porter Martone, that is somebody that Flyers fans are going to adore. Now, granted, I think James Hagens might have fit a little bit better. But if the Flyers are really seeing Zegras as a center long term, then I think it makes sense to go for a winger in this position. And Porter Martone brings intense skill up the ice, something that kind of like Beckett Seneca can just dazzle you with his transition ability. There is some moments where I want to see faster skating speed out of him and just faster decisions in all honesty, but he's somebody that has such a great base to become a great power forward. He just needs to unlock that intensity that I do think he does have inside of him. But I'm going to give the pick a straight A. Fantastic pick for the Flyers and starting off that draft right. But then we go on to the 7th overall selection and the Boston Bruins. And if you're talking about starting the draft off right, I mean, my goodness, this was the best pick that the Bruins could have possibly made. I'm going to give this an A++. The best pick of the first round, in my opinion. James Hagens was ranked 3rd on my board, but for so many key reasons, the speed and the combination of hands is among the best in this draft class. What he's able to accomplish in transition when he just gets that little bit of extra space, he makes you pay for it so consistently. Even though it was kind of a weird fit in BC this last year, I think he is an incredible forward going forward, and somebody that, especially in that Bruins pool, they don't have a ton of pure potential up the middle. Hagens gives them some of that, and I think it'll be pretty awesome in that Bruins pool. But then we get into the 8th overall pick and the Seattle Kraken, and this one confused me quite a bit. Seattle has taken a lot of centers over the past few years, and the Berkeley Cannon one even surprised me a bit, seeing that actually happen after they just drafted Shane Wright and just drafted Matty Beniers. I thought there was zero chance in this draft that the Seattle Kraken would take another center. And the problem here, too, is it's not even like an Anton Friedel situation where he could play center, but he played wing through most of the year, so there's a question about that. Jake O'Brien is a centerman, and I don't think he'd be better as a winger. You're going to be playing him up the middle. I just don't understand where he brings that, how much is he going to be able to push that unless you trade one of these players, which is a possibility, I guess, but I think they're all pretty solid unless you maybe Berkeley Cat on the wing, maybe. It's just a little bit of a confusing situation. I get trying to go for best player available, and Jake O'Brien was one of the best players available to me, but the player that went right after the Buffalo and Ratty Murka, I thought would have been a perfect fit for that defense. The size and the skating that he brings, especially playing in Seattle for the Thunderbirds, I thought would have been a natural fit, but I guess not. I'm going to give the pick a C+ because I still like Jake O'Brien quite a bit, but the fit does confuse me quite a bit. But then let's go on to that 9th overall pick in Buffalo. I mean, as much as he didn't really look all that optimistic about his future when he was sitting there in interviews, I think Ratty Murka is still a great fit for what the Sabres need going forward. A big, rangy, skating defenseman, kind of similar to what they just traded in Michael Kesselring with that huge landmark JJ Peterka deal. But I think Murka is great to fall into the Sabres' laps because he's more of what they need on that right side of the defense. He uses that body well, uses that physicality, and I think it's just a great fit all in all. I'm going to give it a straight A, and if Ratty Murka doesn't eventually get traded, I still think he'll be a pretty good Sabre if the Sabres actually end up keeping him and he wants to stay there, which is a big if. But let's get into that 10th overall pick in the Anaheim Ducks, going for the big swing, which we all kind of expected to see in Roger McQueen. Not as high as he could have potentially gone, but I think that's more so the range that I'm personally comfortable taking in McQueen. With the injuries, with the lack of consistency this year, he wasn't somebody that I saw as a top 5 pick or even near it. But at 10th overall, especially for a team like Anaheim, I don't think it's much of a problem. If he doesn't become anything, they still have Leo Carlson, they still have Mason McTavish. They're still fine in their top 6 center roles, but if he does become something, you're getting somebody that can lead with his rushing ability. His deking ability especially is unbelievable in this class. What he's able to do with his hands is among the best, and of course with that size becomes a pretty tantalizing prospect. I'm a little bit lower on him than most, but if he does pop, this could be a very fun pick for the Ducks going forward. I'm going to give it a C+. It's a very risky one, but again, in the Ducks position, I don't think it matters too much. But let's go on to 11th overall in the Pittsburgh Penguins, who really, I think, shocked me quite a bit, going for Benjamin Kindle at this 11th overall spot. Now, I like Kindle quite a bit. He's in my top 15 prospects ranking, but I was surprised to see them take him at this spot and also trade back in the draft, because what I would have expected was a Kindle drop. I don't think he was somebody that I was expecting to be a top 20 pick in this year's draft. So I thought there was potential for them to trade back that pick, draft somebody like a Kashawn Aitchison, for example, and still get a Kindle at 22nd overall, or at least like a Colin Potter, somebody in that type of mold. But Kindle, I think, is a very solid prospect, somebody that leads with his hands, leads with his skill set, isn't afraid to go against physical pressure. The size and the muscle is a big problem, and that is something that I think could limit him in the future, is that size and how much he is unabashedly not afraid to go against physical pressure, but still doesn't quite have the physicality to do so consistently. We'll see how it works out, but I think in the Penguins pool, they can afford to take some swings swings, and Kindle certainly is that. Now, we did have the Penguins trading their 12th overall pick, and the Flyers rising up in the draft to go up to number 12 overall. And at this spot, my head was buzzing. I was going between so many options. Were they going to trade up for a Victor Eklund? Were they going to trade up for a Kashan Aitchison, a Brayden Coots maybe? If they want to have like another Jet Luchenko type. But ultimately, the Philadelphia Flyers landed on Jack Nesbitt. Now, I'm sorry about that because I didn't actually give the grade for the Benjamin Kindle pick. As of right now, I'm going to give it a C+. Not too bad. But the Flyers one is a bit of a different story to me because even though I respect Jack Nesbitt as a player, I think he's very refined physically. He knows exactly how to use his body. And on the rush, there are times where I can see the speed coming out in bursts. But I have massive problems still with the long-term upside, especially as him as a creator. I don't see a ton of it personally. There are times where I think he is good, especially when he does have that open space, but I'm worried about how much is going to be able to translate going forward. I think at the very least, he will be like a decent fourth-line center, but I just have problems seeing him become anything more than that. And at 12th overall, that's where the problems start to come for me. I think he's a decent player. I ranked him inside my top 50, but he was in the 40s in my draft rankings, just to give you guys a note on that. I think he's a decent player and projects pretty well to the NHL, but again, it's about that long-term upside. I don't quite see that now, but of course, there is time for Nesbitt to prove me wrong in that aspect. As of right now, I'm going to give it a straight D. I don't love the pick, but I'm not going to trash it completely either. Still time for Nesbitt to really unlock the skill if it is there. Now let's keep going through the rest of the draft and go on to the Detroit Red Wings at 13th overall, and I think they made a pretty sound decision here, getting Carter Bear out of the WHL. Great goal scoring, great intensity, especially when he's off the puck. He's somebody that just loves to make the big play, loves to make a big hit here and then, and I think translates pretty well to an energizing role at the NHL. I don't see him being more than a fantastic third liner, but somebody that, alongside a Michael Brandzig-Newgard, brings just so much intensity and goal scoring. Those two I think are pretty similar, but of course one's a right wing, in Carter Bear's case a left wing. But I think for Detroit, he'll be very solid in that middle six, and for them, I'm going to give them a straight B for that selection. Now we go on to 14th overall, the Columbus Blue Jackets. This one was also a bit of a head scratcher at first. I can see why Columbus wants to bet on the type of talent, and for the Blue Jackets, it seems like in general, they just want to go for best player available at times. It's interesting going from Carter Bear to Jackson Smith, because in Smith's case, I thought he was something that might have been dropping a little bit in this draft class. I heard a lot about how people were concerned about the defensive acumen and the decision making, and that I think is pretty warranted. So to see him inside the top 15 still was a little bit surprising to me, especially over defensemen like Kashan Aitchison and Logan Hensler. But in Smith's case, the high moments, the highlights, if you will, are spectacular. This guy can move the puck so well, especially once the offensive zone face-off is created. He's something that can just do so much once the puck is on his stick. The vision and the creativity and the moves that you wouldn't really expect to happen, Smith is so good at creating that. I have my problems with the speed, especially defensively. There are times where I want to see him use that 6'3" body, but he just will not ever use it for the life of me. For some reason, I don't know why it happens. But in Smith's case, if he can actually use that body a bit more, I think there's a lot of offensive potential there. And it's interesting, though, in Columbus' system, because they already got two lefty that I think are excellent offensively in Zach Werenski and Denton Matejchuk. My main concern is that I'm not sure where Jackson Smith really fits for that long term. But again, if you're just betting on talent, I can completely understand. But as of right now, I'm just going to give the pick a C. I'm waiting to see what happens when it comes to Smith. The talent is there. It's just on him to fully unlock it. Then we go on to 15th overall in the Vancouver Canucks, getting Brayden Coots, prediction of mine that has held strong up to this point. Coots, I thought, just fits so well in Vancouver's system, and there you go. As for the grade, I'm going to give it a B+. I think it's exactly what Vancouver needs in that system more of. You're looking at kind of a Bo Horvat 2.0, somebody that is so good at anticipating the play, so good at creating turnovers and creating so much havoc defensively. He's just somebody that I love with the forecheck, with the just leadership he provides on the ice. He's just such a leader in so many ways, trying to put his whole team on his back. It's so much fun to watch, and I think he's one of the more underrated projectable pieces of this class, and I think he'll play a ton of NHL games and play pretty high up in the lineup as a C, and at 15th overall, you'll take that every single day of the week. Now we go on to the Islanders back-to-back picks in Victor Eklund and Kashan Aitchison, and I will say, I still would have liked them to go after James Hagens. Obviously, easier said than done, but I do think these two selections make the Noah Dobson trade a little bit more palatable. Victor Eklund at 16th overall is an absolute home run. I'm just going to say an A+ pick. pick. That is stellar. To me, Victor Eklund is a top 5 talent in this class. So good at winning board battles, so good at using his body to create separation and get to the net front. He's a simple player, but knows how to use that skill, and especially around pressure, that skill comes out in droves. The goal scoring, the knack for the net. He's just such a refined player already. And yes, I get it. He's not a big guy, so there might be some concerns about him translating with that style of game to the NHL. But I see him adding a ton more weight over the next little bit, getting a lot stronger. And if that happens, I think Eklund is a home run, as especially a top 6 wing, a great complementary piece. I think he's going to be exactly what the Islanders want, especially up with a center like a Cal Ritchie going forward. Then you have, of course, their next pick at 17 in Kushan Aitchison. And even though I don't think it's as much of a steal, it's still a pretty solid pick. I'm going to give this selection A-. I think in Aitchison's case, he's just going to be so much fun for that Islanders team. You're looking at an electric player, the goal scoring, especially in overtime. He loves to make that big clutch play, but the physicality, the big hits, the fighting, he will do everything and sacrifice everything in his body to make a win for his hockey team. And that happened, of course, over the course of the season for Barrie. It's going to happen for the New York Islanders. It's just a matter of how much potential there is with his offense, how much that goal scoring is going to be able to carry over. But I think at the very least, you're getting at least a bottom pair defenseman that is a fan favorite immediately, and somebody that I think could play up in the lineup too. But as a great, I think, number 2 left D behind a player like Matthew Schaefer to give him some good help there. So an A- I think makes a lot of sense. Then we go into 18th overall in the Calgary Flames, getting Cole Reshny. I like this pick a lot. Another one like Coots that I kind of predicted before. I think Reshny is a great fit for Calgary and what they kind of need a little bit more of. They've drafted a lot of bigger players over the past few years. Reshny, as a smaller guy, 5'10", I think has everything you need as a smaller player to succeed as a smaller player. One of the smartest players in this draft class positionally. He's something that is so good against physical competition, and I think prides himself on that. He loves to get in the fight. He loves to make things difficult, get to the dirty areas, and get things out of it. And I think especially in Reshny's case, the offense, the skill set is one of the more underrated tool sets in the class, especially with his playmaking. This guy can wheel and deal, and I think especially in the Flames pool, getting him outside the top 15, that's a great talent to acquire. Now let's go on. I guess in Reshny's case, I'm going to give them A- as well, just like the Kushan Aitchison pick. And then we go on to the St. Louis Blues, and I'm actually going to give this pick as well an A- because they end up selecting Justin Carbonneau, who I think is just going to be so much fun in this Blues pool. I mean, he's something that I've gone back and forth on. I think he's kind of like a little bit of a lesser Lyndon Lakovic, who, funnily enough, actually went later than a player like Carbonneau. But those two players are pretty similar to me, where they use a lot of their offense off the rush, their creativity, their deking ability, their one-on-one situational awareness, and how they're able to present their bodies. In Carbonneau's case, though, he's such a refined player in the physicality that he presents and how he's able to rush up the ice with it and how he's able to just make things so much more easy for his line mates and everybody up the ice. I have some concerns over the two-way game, and the engagement is going to be a little bit of a concern, but my goodness, a 19th overall to get that type of talent, I don't really blame the Blues whatsoever. Now let's get into the last pick of the top 20, and this was a interesting one. With the Blue Jackets going after the first goalie in the draft in Pyotr Andrianov, and I would not have expected this in a million years, especially with Andrianov recently signing a contract extension in the KHL, taking him until 2030. I thought his stock was actually going to drop a ton, but we did not see that on draft day. I will say, in terms of the player, one of the best ones out there. To me, the second-rate goaltender in this class behind Alexei Medvedev. As you guys can see, a .942 save percentage in the NHL this year. Unreal numbers. Of course, Russia is a goaltending factory, so I don't blame Columbus for doing this. But at 20th overall, that's a bit high still to what I would have gone for him. I don't think there are any goaltenders in this class for me that are worthy of first-round selections. But for Columbus that needs some talent in goal going forward, Andrianov is a pretty good bet to make if you're going to make any. So even though I probably would have preferred a player like Logan Hensler going into that pool instead, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to give the pick a C+ because I am still pretty high on Andrianov, but the selection is where the Blue Jackets get me. Though, in Shinikov's case, of course, that turned out to be pretty good, so we'll see how the Blue Jackets are able to develop him going forward. But then we go on to 21st overall in Nashville Predators, and they get a pretty solid selection here in Cameron Reed. They traded up a couple spots, and they end up getting a pretty solid player here. I think in Reed's case, especially as a lefty, he has some pretty big boomer bust traits. I love the skating ability and how he processes the game, but there are times where the physicality just isn't there. The defensive game just isn't strong enough consistently to be something that I think you can depend upon to play defensive minutes. But this guy just has so much going for him in terms of his IQ and how he processes the game going up the ice that there's just a lot to tap into. So we'll see if Nashville's able to do so. There are some kinks to work out, but a very interesting player to look at. So I'm going to give the pick a straight B. Then Then going on to 22nd overall in the Pittsburgh Penguins, they end up going for Bill Zidane out of the QMJHL. And this one is a fascinating one because I think Zidane is one of the more projectable, one of the more safer centers in this draft class. He is listed as a right wing for some folks, but he played center throughout most of the course of this season. And I like him quite a bit. The intensity, the work ethic, you're not going to find many harder workers in this first round. He's just somebody that's very simple, knows exactly his strengths and weaknesses, and just is able to put himself out there in great positions to succeed. I think he's a leader on the ice in a lot of ways too. And even though I might have concerns about some of the skating speed issues and how quick he's able to make those quick decisions, I think in Zidane's case, he's going to round out as a pretty solid bottom 6 piece. Then we go on to 23rd overall and the Logan Hensler pick. This one was interesting because after the Bill Zidane pick, which I think is a solid one, I give it a B-. Hensler is a fascinating one. I didn't really think he was going to drop this far in this draft. It seemed like in general, right? D dropped a little bit more than I was expecting. But in Logan Hensler's case, I think this is a slam dunk pick for the Ottawa Senators and an easy one to select. In my case, I'm going to give this selection a straight A. I think for the Sens, especially after you drafted Carter Yakimchuk, who's more of an offensive zone creator, somebody that when the puck is going through the cycle, can bomb shots from the point and create goals that way. In Hensler's case, I think he provides a lot of value just getting the puck out of the defensive zone, rushing up the ice in transition, using that great skating speed and ability to shy off pressure to his advantage. And that to me is a good part of this, is that it brings a lot more balance to that Ottawa Senators right side, especially where you have two different kind of offensive defensemen. But in Hensler's case, you can take it in so many different directions. He can be just this competent two-way D that I think rounds out as a great middle pair D in the end. And that takes us on to 24th overall in the Pittsburgh Penguins. They get another pick here, and they select another centerman in William Horkoff. This one was a little bit strange to me. Not that Horkoff went to the first round or even that he was a Pittsburgh Penguin. I think those two things make sense. But after the Penguins already selected a Kindle, which he might be a wing long-term, but he played his best hockey as a centerman, and Bill Zidane, who, again, might be a wing, but I think is a center long-term, you go for William Horkoff, who I think is also a center long-term. So you potentially drafted 3 centers inside the first round, which isn't a bad thing. I think Pittsburgh can need some more help up the middle going forward, but it is a bit curious, I would say. Horkoff, I think, out of everybody, though, that they drafted, is the most likely to be a center. With the physical bulk that he provides, he's somebody that just uses his body in so many good ways, shielding the puck, getting to the net, making things simple, and especially creating for his teammates in the playmaking side. He got a lot better as well once he joined University of Michigan this last year in the second half. I think he'll be a solid player and an NHLer for sure. Just like Zidane, though, I question the upside. I think Kindle's probably the only one in this class that I think really projects as a top 6, even at their best. So for the pick, I'm going to give it a decent grade. I give it a C-, but nothing that's incredible or anything. Then we go on to 25 overall, and the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, their second half of the first round was fascinating. They went after Anton Friendel, bringing in some size. They bring in some more size. They get Vaclav Nestrasil at number 25, and this is a big pick to make. I mean, 6'6" Czech, who in the USHL is one of the rawest. I would say out of everybody in this class, besides maybe Mason West in the first round, he's probably the rawest player in this class in general. But I think in Nestrasil's case, there's so much long-term upside here to tap into. He is so good in transition with his hands. It is wonderful to watch how big this guy is, but how good of a processor he can be. What he's able to come up with, especially in the offensive zone, can be straight up magical. And even though some of it might have some concerns translating, and I think he is a long-term project, we're talking long-term. If he does pop, I think he could be a top 6 wing, and at that point, it could be a pretty solid pick. So for right now, I'm going to give it a B-, but a big wait and see on Nestrasil's case. Now we go on to 26 overall in the Nashville Predators in Riker Lee. And this is the thing that I think I kind of disagree with strategically with Nashville, is that they seem to go for the safer bet inside the top 5 while going for the more skillful players in the back half of the first round. And we'll have to wait and see how it ends up turning out. But I think I would have rather had a James Hagens at 5th overall than and maybe like a Blake Fiddler or something with their second pick, and then like a Malcolm Spence, for example. Of course, 2 guys I just mentioned that went outside the first round, but I think are 2 guys that should be in the first round personally. So I think for Nashville, there's going to be an interesting reason to see what happens here next. But in Riker Lee's case, he's somebody that grew a ton throughout the course of the season, not even just with his game, but his actual height. He was like 5'9" at the start of the year, end of the season at 6 foot, and I think could maybe grow a couple more inches, but kind of like Nestrasil, so good on the rush with his hands and how he's able to create for his teammates. I love the separation though that he's able to provide, and if that feet get a little bit stronger too, Lee I think could be a really interesting scorer, especially at the next level. I like him a lot. and we'll see how it translates. As of right now, I'm going to give the pick a B- because I like Lee so much, but it will be interesting to see how this Nashville strategy does come to pass. But then we go on to 27, and the Washington Capitals, they've done it again, folks. They just continue to make great pick after great pick recently, and they get another one here at Lyndon Lakovic, 27th overall. This to me is a top 15 talent, especially if we're talking talent. This guy is wonderful to watch. When he is at the best of his game, this guy can deke pretty much everybody out and make it look so easy. He has so much talent, so much skill. The big problem is just unlocking that consistently, getting that shift after shift, getting that effort level to a spot where you actually can see him as an NHLer. That will be the big question. But I think in Lakovic's case, this might be a little bit of a wake-up call going later in the first round. I think that might be good for him, because if he unlocks that talent, if he gets just like a little bit better in terms of his effort, this kid could be wonderful. As for now, right now, I'm going to give the pick an A+. It just has so much upside that I can't hate it whatsoever. I have to love it. It's just so interesting. Then on to number 28, the Winnipeg Jets end up selecting Sasha Bouminainen. This thought, I mean, this is around the range where I expected him to go. Pretty easy selection for the Winnipeg Jets to make. Big skater and really uses that skating to his advantage a lot. I think that kind of can be a detriment at times, because I think he can kind of over-rely on it a little bit, and he's not the biggest defenseman physically either, so there are some things that I really want to see him improve upon. It's a curious pick for the Jets that have drafted a couple of European defensemen, smaller guys that they just don't seem to want to play. And Bouminainen isn't small, but he kind of plays more of a smaller game. So I'm curious to see how that translates for the Jets going forward, but still an interesting project to take on. So as of right now, I'm going to give the pick a C+. Then we go into the last few picks here. Mason West at 29th overall to the Chicago Blackhawks. I adore this. Mason West, one of the highest potentials in this class. I mean, right up with a player like Lachlan Hall still, who we just talked about. Chicago wanting to get bigger in this draft, and they certainly did so. Mason West is huge, but like Nestor Sill, he is so much fun to watch with his hands, with his playmaking especially. West, I think, is more of a playmaker than Nestor Sill is, and he's so good at finding the open lanes for his teammates, and in transition, I thought was a lot more refined than maybe people would expect. He's really good at getting the puck out of his own zone, finding lanes for his teammates to get things out of pressure, and I think actually played a better two-way game than even I was expecting coming into the year. So I think West has massive potential, massive opportunity in Chicago's system, and another player like Nestor Sill, that if he does pop, turns out to be pretty good. So I'm going to give the pick a straight B. Very solid selection, though, for Chicago, and I like it quite a bit. Then we go on to number 30, and this was another puzzling one for me, seeing the San Jose Sharks selecting Joshua Ravensbergen. Now, I understand it. The Sharks want to get some more depth in the goaltending side of things, but I think there were better ways to go about it, and quite frankly, better goaltenders in this draft that didn't end up getting selected. Semyon Frolov, Alexei Medvedev, personally, I think are better than Ravensbergen. But Ravensbergen, of course, huge size, huge pedigree. That's going to take him quite a ways. But I think the big thing that I'm concerned with the Sharks pick is that you have a defenseman that was Sam Dickinson's D-pair throughout all this last season in London, going on to win the Memorial Cup, selected the next pick right after that. And I still think San Jose needs right defenseman. They need somebody to fill those type of roles, and they don't have a lot of the system at all to be able to fill that long term. There is still time, of course, for them to draft guys, and I don't think the rebuild is done necessarily this next year, but it is a concern of mine if they aren't able to get a player like Blake Fiddler as well in the second round once that starts back up. We'll see what happens, but as of right now, I'm not the biggest fan of the pick. I'm going to give it a straight D. But then that leads us on to the LA Kings selecting Henry Brustevitz, and I like him quite a bit. Pretty big physical mold, likes to involve himself in transition, and a really good shot on him too. 10 goals and 42 points, 67 games this last year. A lot of refinement needs to happen with a raw defenseman, especially on the right side, and there are times positionally where I often get a little bit confused defensively with him, but there are times where Brustevitz can really do some great things out there, and I think he projects pretty well as a bottom pair, more physical defenseman. And then we go on to the Calgary Flames getting Colin Potter at the 32nd overall spot, and this is just tidy business no matter how you slice it. To me, this is exactly what the Flames should be doing more of, and they get two guys that are smaller that people might be doubting, but I think could turn out to be really great players. Colin Potter, one of the more underrated names in this draft for me, and this just cements it. He's somebody that is a top 10, though 10th ranked player on my board for so many reasons. To me, he is the best skater among the forwards in this class. The straight line speed, how he's able to turn off defenders and make things deceptive. He is just so good on the rush, so good at creating for his team and rushing in the right directions. He's so good at carrying the puck and keeping it and going against physical pressure, even though it is a bit of an issue at times. I've seen some pretty good moments out of him, and I think he wants to engage more physically, though that just isn't quite his game. I think at the peak, you're getting a very solid second line player here that can drive play well, kind of like a Nikolai Ehlers. Might get doubted a ton because there might be some defensive mistakes here and there, but the high end offense is just too good to pass up on. I give it an A+, fantastic pick to end the first round on. But going through all the grades here for this first round, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I think it was a pretty balanced first round. A couple picks that, yes, I might disagree with, but at the end of the day, I can still see the reasonings for. This draft was all over the place, and this first round certainly did show that. But this was so much fun to put together, and thank you guys so much for tuning in through today and all the draft content we've been putting out on the channel. If you guys enjoy, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell for more videos just like this, because we are not done. And if you guys want to watch some more content, you can click on this card for all the 2025 draft content right in one playlist. Comment down below your thoughts on all these deals, all these different picks. I want to know for your team as well. How do you think your team did? What would you grade their picks? Let me know your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online, and I will see you guys in the next one. Make sure you have a fantastic hockey day for me, and goodbye.